Good afternoon and welcome to Making Life Easier in Lightroom with Jo Houghton. My name is Melanie Chalk and I am coordinator of the RPS Digital Imaging Southeast Centre. I'd like to extend a very warm welcome to you all. Thank you for signing up for this webinar. We have members of the Digital Imaging Group, RPS members and also non-members joining us today. Let me tell you the plan for this webinar. This Zoom event has a special question and answer feature. At the bottom of your screen, or possibly at the top if you're using a tablet, you will see a Q&A icon. You can click on this to ask a question. At the end of Joe's tour of Lightroom, there will be a short amount of time for him to answer some questions. But with time restraints, we may not be able to answer them all. So please, questions specifically about Lightroom only. Thank you. So let me introduce you to Joe Houghton. He's an experienced photographer and trainer and is an Adobe certified expert in Lightroom. He's trained thousands of people in camera skills and techniques, as along with his wife Penny, they run Houghton Photography in Dublin, Ireland. And he also sells images and books all over the world. But like many other things, these workshops have been suspended. But Joe has a constant presence online via Zoom, and during the last year has visited very many groups and has been kept extremely busy. As we hand over to Joe, I just want to remind you to use the Q&A feature to ask any questions for Joe to answer after his presentation, but not the ordinary chat box. So my great pleasure to introduce you to Joe. And if you'd like to share your screen in a minute, I can just tell you that it's all working.
Okay, let's see whether my desktop comes up as a share.
Yes, that's fine.
Fantastic.
Okay. Thank you.
Great.
So it's over to you now.
Okay, well, thanks for that lovely introduction, Melanie. And it's quite daunting to watch the numbers creep up. Over 200, I think, are online at the moment, by the look of it. 237 are on, this is by far my biggest ever Zoom presentation. So thanks for coming, and I hope it's worthwhile. We've got until about 3:30, I believe. So an hour and a half, and the idea of today, and we have a follow-up session coming up as well, is to just do an introduction to Lightroom, to show you the features and maybe some hints and tips and tricks that you don't know. Some of you, I think, have seen me probably doing camera club talks around the UK since COVID particularly. So if you've seen one of those talks, we may do a bit of the same stuff because it's the same program after all. But I love Lightroom. I've used Lightroom since it was before it was released. Actually, I was one of their original beta testers. So it's the place I spend 95% of my time in when I'm editing and producing images. A little bit in Photoshop, but I'm not a big compositor. So most of the time Lightroom will do the job for me. Now that's not to say that other programs shouldn't be used. I drop into Nick Silver Effects, I drop into other programs where needed, but most of the time Lightroom seems to do the job for me. So that's what I'm going to show you today. So as I say, this first session, what I'm probably going to do is maybe do the first half before the break on the library module, which is the organization module, and then the second half we'll drop into develop, and we'll just do a little bit on develop, and then perhaps the same thing in the second session, but going through with a bit more detail. So I think that's the plan. So I've just queued up, because on my machine it sometimes takes a minute or two just for an SD card to register. I've just dropped us into the import view in Lightroom, and I know that importing and the way it all works, it's not the most intuitive part of Lightroom, and a couple of years back they tried to simplify it and made a hames of it, and then they had to kind of restore it back as it was after a few weeks. So I thought we'd do just a go through the import process, and I just explain a little bit about how you do an import and why things are where they are and stuff like that. So you can see the screen here. I've put in an SD card from my Nikon D810. So the SD card shows up here if it's named. If it doesn't show up here, it'll show up down here. So you can either click up there or you can click down there. You get into the same thing, which is the pictures from the card. Okay. So there's all photos, new photos, and stuff like that. I just leave it on all photos. Okay. And you can check or uncheck all the photos on the card. So if you've just had a clean card and you've gone out for the day and you've shot your shots, then you're going to want everything on the card. So you can just hit check all, which is what it checks by default. So every photo has a tick in it. Okay, but you can see here now. I only want to bring in. I'm just going to bring in like 4 or 5, just so that it's nice and quick. Okay, so if I uncheck all, that takes the tick off all the photos. Okay, and now what I can do is I can just decide which of the photos I want to click. So if I want to bring that one in, and then everything up to say here, I can click on the first one, go to the end, shift click, and it'll click everything from the first photo that I selected to the second one. If I choose that and I don't want the next one, but I want this one, rather than shift and click, which will select everything from the first one through to the last one, I can just hold the command key. Now I'm on a Mac. So command on a Mac is control on a Windows machine. Okay, so command or control. So what that'll do is allow you to select, non-contiguous images. Okay, so let's say we want to bring those 3 in and that one. There we are. So we choose them, and then we just put a tick in one of the boxes, and because the other the ones are chosen, the tick will now be applied to all your selected images. Okay, so that's how you can do that. And if you wanted to choose a load to bring in, you could click on the first one and scroll down a bit, a few pages or whatever, and then click on this one, shift click, it selects everything, and then you could just put the tick in there, and all those boxes would get a tick in. Okay, but we'll leave it with the ones that we've got, those 4. Okay. So now this right hand, let's do the middle bit first. Okay, so we've got copy as DNG and copy. Okay, now move and add have grayed out because I've put in a removable disk, an SD card. Okay, so we're going to be copying from the SD card down onto the hard drive of the computer. Copy as DNG will bring in the original file. So this is a D810. So these are .nef files. You can see that the names of them here. Okay. So if I copy as DNG, it will copy the nef files down onto the hard drive, and then it will do a second pass through them, and it will convert them from .nef to .dng. .dng is the Adobe RAW file standard. It tends to be about 25–30% smaller in terms of each file on the drive than certainly the Nikon files. And I think the same goes for the CR2 files for Canon. I don't know about Panasonic. So if you are shooting Nikon and Canon and hard drive space is an issue because they're relatively big files with modern cameras, you'll save about 25% of your disk space by editing and then converting. Now, that conversion process into DNG takes a while. So, if you just want them ingesting as fast as possible, just do a copy. Okay, but I tend to find that Lightroom works a little bit quicker on DNG files than it does on nef files. I don't shoot Canon, so I can't really comment on the CR2. So that's maybe something to think about. Those of you that have seen my street talk will know that in the last couple of years, I've also fallen in love with another camera or another camera brand, which is the Fuji X series. Here's my little Fuji X-T2, which I love. Lightroom for a while wasn't very good with Fuji. there was this problem with seeing little artifacts in the Fuji raw files like worms. They fixed that about a year ago, so now it's fine. Okay, I import my raw files in all the time from Fuji, the .raf files. What I don't do, however, is I don't convert them to DNG. When I was converting them to DNG, it just didn't seem that I wasn't getting the same quality out of the images that I was when I just brought them in as RAF files. So when I'm importing Fuji stuff, I copy, and when I'm importing Nikon stuff, I'm copying as DNG. Okay, so that's where I'm going. As far as I know, the DNG file is slightly more efficient, and because Adobe developed that standard, they've engineered the DNG format so that it is more compressed, but you don't lose any detail. Okay, so it's a you're not losing any of the detail that you have in your NEF or your CR2. So there's our images, and we're going to copy these as DNG. Okay. Now let's have a look on the right hand side, because there's quite a bit of stuff going on down here, and a lot of people kind of just bypass a lot of this stuff. Previews. One-to-one previews will give you 100% preview. So it basically builds a second image alongside your big raw file, okay, which is a kind of one-to-one preview in Lightroom. Now that takes a little bit longer, okay. So again, if speed of import is your thing, then just do minimal, okay. But then what happens is each time you click on an image, once you're going through the development module and the library module, it's having to build that preview on the fly. So there's just a little bit of a pause between each image. If you build those images on import using one-to-one or standard, you'll find that moving between images once you're in the library or the develop module is quicker. But somewhere you pay the price, because those images those previews have to be built sometime. Okay, so generally what I do is when I get in from a shoot, I just put the card in, I start it importing, and I go off and make a cup of tea. So that works for me. I know if you're a working pro and you want to ingest 1,000 shots from a wedding or whatever, it's a different beast. But for most of us, we're amateur photographers, and if it takes a few minutes more, it's not the end of the world. So I would normally just put standard on my build previews. Okay. Smart previews, I think we will cover in the second workshop, but there's some really cool stuff around smart previews. If you have an external drive, you can, as well as importing to presumably your C drive or your D drive, one of your local drives on your computer or your laptop, you can also, at the same time, tell it to copy off to another drive. Okay, so if you check that box, then you can choose which drive you want to use and a folder. And so you can kind of have automatic backup straight away, because you can copy to your local drive and then to an external drive at the same time. So that can be quite good. Now, as I'm going to show you in a minute, I actually don't really need to do that because of the way that I have my my drive on my laptop organized. So whether you want to do that or not is another thing. And then there's an option to add to collections, and we'll have a little look at collections later on. My Nikon names these files, so I've told it to put my initials on the front of the file name. So I've got MJH, and then I've got four numbers, and then .NEF. Okay, so very often what's coming in is this kind of pretty meaningless jumble of numbers and letters, whatever camera you're using. And I know you can change that in some cameras, and if you've done that, that's great. But Lightroom gives you the opportunity on import then to do anything you like with the file name. So you can make it much more meaningful. You can add shoot detail, you can add dates and times, all this kind of stuff. Okay, and this is what the rename file option does here. So on import, it can change the file name for you based on rules that you set. And this is very powerful. So if you click down on that little custom settings and go down to edit, you now have this template editor. So you build up the file name that you want under here. Okay, So if I take all this away, okay, so I want my file name to be the date that the image was taken, year, month, day, so that it's ordered by year and then month by day. So I can go down here to additional, yeah, and one of the options there is YYYY So I choose that and I insert that into this box here. And then I want, then I put in a dash, yeah. Then I want the original file name straight out of the camera. Okay, so I just use file name, insert that, and then another dash, and then I just like to put my name in there as well, so that if this file ends up anywhere, at least it's got my name on it. Okay, it's also got my name embedded in the metadata, which we'll cover in a little while, but this just covers the file names. Okay, so the reason that I actually make the file name, you know, the date and the file name and the name, is then that when I'm in Windows Explorer or in Finder or something like that, then I can actually order things by the date. I can see that they're my name if I just send one and copying and stuff like that. So it's not hidden away, embedded in the metadata. It's kind of there explicit as part of the file name. So I quite like that. So that's done. And then you see that's a preset. So I could save that with a name now. So I could call that my, you know, Joe's, you know, best file name or whatever. Okay, and now that's a preset that I can just choose from this list. So I could choose done now, and then that's in that list. So I can just choose it. Okay. So for instance, I'm a Getty stock photographer. So some of my images go into Getty and I sell them on as stock. So I've got a Getty file naming convention, which is slightly different because they want certain things when you upload to Getty. So you could, depending on what you're doing, you know, maybe I know if you enter a salon or you sometimes club competitions, they want maybe your membership number and, you know, whether you're intermediate or novice or advanced or whatever, but you can't generally include your name in the file name. So, you know, you could very easily set up a club file name as well here and just choose that if you're going to import stuff that you know is going to be used for club. So that's that. This next bit is really powerful and a lot of people don't seem to know about it, okay? But applied during import, you can do stuff to the images as they are being brought into Lightroom. You can change, you know, from color to black and white. You can change the crop. You can change the exposure. You can do almost anything that you can do in the develop module, you can apply to the image automatically on entry, okay? So this develop settings tab, little drop down here, is incredibly powerful. Okay, so I've got a few develop settings that I've marked as favorites. So for instance, there's a black and white strong one, and what that does is it converts images that I'm importing straight into black and white. Okay, and does a little bit of contrast and tweaking and stuff like that, so that they're already quite contrasty when they appear in the library module. Most of my street work, I shoot on the Fuji, and I only shoot my street work in black and white. So I'm shooting raw files, which are in color, but the camera shows me them in black and white. Yeah. So I don't want to see the color image. So when I import them, I tell Lightroom using this preset, flick it onto, instead of color, as you know, click on that black and white choice in the develop module. So when they arrive in Lightroom, they've been converted to black and white. The color's still in there, but I'm seeing them as black and white. So that's pretty cool. I won't do that to these two that these four that I'm going to pull in now, because those are nice color images. And then the metadata, okay, this gives you the ability to embed in the file itself your details, your name, your copyright details, maybe your phone number or your website and stuff like that. And if you use Lightroom, you should all have this enabled, because if you don't include your details with your files in the metadata and somebody else gets hold of a copy of that file and decides to take it as their own or use it or whatever, if there's nothing in the metadata to prove that it's your image, it's almost impossible for you to assert copyright over that image. Okay, so you can just go into edit presets, and then all this data, all these different fields are there in the file along with the actual picture, the image. And you can go down and you can put in, for instance, what I normally do is I put in the IPTC copyright details here. Yeah. I put in the creator details, so that's where you put your name in, your city, your your phone number, email, website, that kind of stuff. And those are the only two bits that I actually put data into most of the time. Okay, and then I save that data, yeah, and then so I'll cancel this one because I don't want to save this one. Done. Don't save. Right, there we go. Yeah, and then I've got this list of the different metadatas that I've used, and you can see, Joe Houghton 2014, 2015. So I just update it each year. So we're up to Joe Houghton 2021, and that's got my name and my email and my phone number and my website and everything that embedded in every image. Okay. And the last thing is the keywords there. Okay, for apply during import. So these I shot out at Donabate, I think, last month. So I might put that in. I might put in Donabate Beach. Yeah. I might put in Ireland. I might put in winter, coastline. And you can see that some of these things, so if I try to put in Ireland again in there, you see, because I've used that keyword before, it pops up and there it is. And I don't have to type the whole word. I could just choose it from the list. Okay, but I don't need that one there. So put in words which, and you see there, so coastline. So if I start to type it, yeah, AS, there we are, coastline. I can just choose coastline. Yeah, and it'll just make it up for me there. So these are going to be applied to all the images on entry. So any keywords that apply to everything that you're bringing in this time around, put them in there. And then where are you going to import to? Now, I have a pictures folder, you probably do on your machine. And under that pictures folder, I create a year folder, subfolder. And within the year folder, I create a month folder. So 01 January 2021. Now, if I want to create a new month folder for February, because I haven't got one now, I right click on 2020, create a new folder. And Lightroom, when you do it here, it normally fires up Finder. Okay, so it doesn't do it in Lightroom. It calls Finder. If you're on a Windows machine, it'll call Windows Explorer. So there we are. Yeah. And now I can just create a new folder and I call it 02 February 2021. Why am I putting 02 in front of things? Well, if I don't put a number in front of, have I created that underneath for January? No, there we are. Yeah, so 2021, 01, 02. But you see now, in alphabetical sequencing, February would come before January under the 2021 folder. But if you put in 01, 02, then it sorts the months in the right order. Okay, so that just helps with that. So you choose the folder into which you want the images to be imported, and then you hit the import key. Okay, and then that will drop you into the library module. There's 2020. Now let's just come down to 2021. There we are. There's 2021. There's a February folder being created. And up here now, Lightroom is going to copy those 4 raw files and it's going to put them into the February 2021 folder. And this is one of the big gripes with Lightroom. Okay. And I don't think anybody likes this bit of Lightroom. They need to do something about it. It's too slow. It's just very, very slow at importing stuff. So you just have to grin and bear it, I'm afraid. So as you see, I'm bringing in 4 raw files from a D810, which are 40 or 50 megabytes each. So it's a couple of 100 megabytes of files being brought in and added to the database. Okay, and it's slow. And now because I said convert to DNG. So it's copied the files in now, they're in. Yeah. So now I got to wait again now while it takes each of those NEF files and converts them in turn to DNG. Now you can start editing them. I normally just let this run. Okay. But you see, it's not taking too bad. So that one's done, that one's done, that one's done, that one's done. Right, we're done. Okay. And now it's just building the standard previews. So that was okay, but it's a good thing I wasn't trying to import 200 files. We'd have been waiting here all day. So now we've got those in our catalog. When you import to a Lightroom catalog, the files, the images themselves are not in the Lightroom catalog. The Lightroom catalog is a filing system. It's a little database program, basically. So the files themselves are on the hard drive under Dropbox Pictures 2021, 02 February 2021. That's where the .nef files, which are now .dng files, are actually physically stored. Okay. The Lightroom catalog is off in another folder. Okay. But it's pointing, so that import process basically wrote the information that this file here, yeah, which is what, now 2020-08-25 mjh8811.joehoughton.dng, that particular image there is in this folder on this drive. Okay. And that's the only thing that's in the Lightroom catalog at the moment. When we make edits, those will also be added into the Lightroom catalog, but the image itself doesn't sit in the Lightroom catalog. So if you, for instance, lost your Lightroom catalog, you wouldn't lose your images. Your images are still there on your hard drive in the folders that they're in. You might lose some of the information about the edits, but you won't lose the raw files, the image. And Lightroom never, ever changes the raw file itself, okay? It writes information alongside the raw file, or in a DNG file, there's a part of the file that's kind of got, empty space that Lightroom can write in information about the changes that have been made to the original raw file. So this is one of the reasons Lightroom is such a powerful editor, because it's what's called a non-destructive editor. So when you make changes in Lightroom, you're not ever affecting that first digital image that came out of the camera. All you're saying is, take that digital image and then apply this sequence of changes that I decided I wanted to make. Raise the exposure, crop it, straighten it, do that. And that's just a set of little text kind of messages that Lightroom says, okay, here's the original file. I can find it on the hard drive. So I load that. Now, have I got any more stuff that I need to do to it? Yeah, I need to raise the exposure. I need to straighten it. I need to crop it. And that's what then comes up on the screen, your edited shot. Okay. Now, of course, then you can export that edited shot as a JPEG, and that JPEG has all that stuff baked into it. But your original DNG or NEF files or CR2 files or RAF files or whatever are never actually touched by Lightroom. Okay. Okay, so now why did I put, I wanted to explain why I put stuff in where I did. So I store my pictures folder under Dropbox. Okay, and I don't know whether you use Dropbox or whether you might use Google Drive or whatever, but I really hope that you all have some automated backup system for your images. Okay. So Dropbox, I pay €100 a year, I think, to them or something. I've got 4 terabytes, I think, of space in the cloud. Anything that's in the Dropbox folder or any subfolders under Dropbox automatically gets synchronized into the cloud as soon as anything's put in there. And as soon as any changes are made, they get synchronized up to the cloud. Now, I'm lucky. I'm in a fast broadband area. I've got a terabyte broadband connection. It's really, really quick most of the time. And so that's great for me. If you haven't got that, this might not be the right solution for you. But for me, it works. So all my images on import go into a folder under Dropbox pictures. Yeah. And when they're imported, now Dropbox is now firing those 4 images up to the cloud as well. So if my machine crashes partway through an edit, or I've lost these images because the hard drive crashes or whatever, yeah, as long as I've had 2 or 3 minutes for these things to be squirted up into the cloud, I'm good. And over the years, I've had laptops and I've had computers die on me, and I would highly recommend that. Okay, so that's why I keep my folders on the hard drive under Dropbox, because then they get automatically synced to the cloud. Now, I only keep about a month's worth of data on my C drive because it's only a 1 or 2 terabyte hard drive. What I also have is a network drive. So if I scroll down here, so this is all my C drive you can see now. And then we see other drives here. So these are old kind of external drives that I've kind of used over the years with Lightroom. But about 18 months, 2 years ago, I invested in one of those big kind of NAS network storage arrays with 5 bays in. And each one of these things has got a 20 or 30 terabyte hard drive in. So I've got, I think, 120 terabytes of RAID array in my living room through there with an Ethernet cable to it. So that's this photo drive here. And that drive has got on pretty much every shot I've taken since 2000. Okay, so you can see that they're all there. So each month I just move them out. So you can see 2020 there. I've got the whole year, 6,500 shots, something like that. And it's quite interesting looking back over the years and seeing, some years you shot a lot more. 2019, I was really active, 25,000 shots. Not so many in 2020 because I haven't been out, been stuck at home like everybody else. And 2021, I don't think I've even loaded any images into the computer since 2021. So it's that's just the way it goes. Okay, so let's come back up to my my folder. There we are, and so now we can click on these images. So if I double click on an image in the library module, then the image comes up, and there's nothing done to this image. This is straight out of the camera, so we get our first look, if you like, at the image. The navigator view is a smaller view. So if we want to zoom in, so if I just click now, you can see the plus cursor there. If I click on that cursor, it will zoom into whatever zoom is set up here. Okay, so it's a little bit more, and I can drop down here and choose the different zoom. So if I wanted to really, really zoom in close, I could even go into 1600%. Okay, and that's tiny. And now the zoom, you can see there's a little square. Let me come back out a bit so that you can see the square. Let's come back out to 400%. There we are. So you can see that square in the navigator view, and I can now click and drag that square, okay, and move around my image. And now I'm looking at that image at 400% magnification. And if I want to come out to 200%, I can, or come out to 100%, 1:1, which is normally enough. You normally don't need to go in any closer than 100%, because kind of that's what most people are going to view your image at, or you can fit it to the available width of the screen here. Now, once I'm into the grid view, which is this view like this that we had before, and the shortcut key to get back to that is G for grid. I normally close this left-hand panel because that's just showing the folder structures at the moment. So I close that, and then when I double click, my image fills this part of the screen. Okay, because then you may want to do some stuff over here in terms of keywording or metadata, putting information in. So, but again, yeah, I could apply metadata now here. So I can apply the Joe Houghton 2021 metadata, and it would apply it to this image. And I've got my name and my copyright details and stuff. So you can do it here as well. And there you see down at the bottom now, under the metadata, artist there, yeah, that I'm in Dublin, I'm in Ireland, there's my email address and stuff like that. So you can put that stuff in. Okay. Keywording, a lot of people don't like it. Now you can see there's already 4 keywords in there because I told it to apply 4 keywords when it came in. Now this particular image, yeah, let's say that I choose this one and I'm going to do some editing. Well, then I'll normally add some more keywords to this, because if I'm bothering editing it, it's going to end up somewhere. It'll be ending up on stock, or I'm doing it for club, or I'm doing it for salon, or for a client, or whatever. So I'm going to add some more keywords that are specific to this one. So maybe long exposure, and you can see I've already done it. So I can just hit the enter key and it pops that in. Okay. Rock might be another one. Yeah. More keywords you put in, the easier it is later to bring this image back. My Lightroom catalog at the moment has 630,000 images in it. One single catalog referencing all my images on all those hard drives, on that big network array, on the ones that are on the hard drive to my computer. There's 630,000 images referenced by my Lightroom catalog. Okay, Lightroom knows where they all are, and I can search through 630,000 images. Yeah, so I can put in a keyword and say, right, show me all the images with a keyword of rock, and it will then tell me that I've got all these images. And then some of them perhaps are not online because those drives are disconnected at the moment, but in which case I get a little exclamation mark next to the image. The ones that are online, I can just click and edit and up they come. Okay, so the keywording is quite powerful. This is one of the areas where this version of Lightroom, and this version of Lightroom that I'm using at the moment is Lightroom Classic. Lightroom Classic is the version of Lightroom that's been around forever. Okay, that we're now in version 10, and it was just updated to 10 a few weeks ago. So this is the desktop version that you use with raw files or with thousands and thousands of images. About, I think, a couple of years ago, 2 or 3 years ago, they brought another version of Lightroom out just to confuse us all. Okay, and they called that Lightroom as well. They didn't kind of change the name or whatever. But that one is designed to work with images that are completely stored in the cloud. So that's aimed more at, your light hobbyist photographer who's probably only shooting JPEGs, just a few dozen at a time kind of thing. And all those images are stored in the cloud, and Adobe charges through the nose for their cloud storage. For club photographers and semi-pros and pros, it's just not practical yet to do that. Not when you've got 10, 20, 40, 100 terabytes of files to move up and down. The internet just ain't fast enough yet for that. It may come to that in a few years, but it isn't. So for now, I'm using Classic, and that's the one that I kind of train on and teach on. If you're using the other one, which is Adobe Lightroom CC, okay, that's the cloud version. It has some slightly different features. And one of the things that they're building into the CC version, because it's always online, are a lot of kind of artificial intelligence features. And one of them is the keywording. You kind of don't need to do as much keywording on the CC version because they've got image recognition in it now. So, you can just type in kitten, and the artificial intelligence engine will scan through all your images and find all the kittens and bring them up, even if you've never keyworded those images as a kitten. So that's pretty cool. Now, I think they will probably port that into this version of Lightroom at some point, but they haven't done yet. So for now, if you want to find your images based on keywords and stuff, you've actually got to put keywords in. So just get used to doing it. Make it part of your import discipline to do these keywords, and things get a lot easier. Okay, and it even comes up with keyword suggestions. I mean, look at this. So I'm in the enter keywords thing here. I've put these things in, and these are the suggestions that it's coming up with. And these are keywords that are in my existing list of keywords. Okay, so beach, well, that's a good one. Yeah, so I'll click on beach and it'll just add it in to the keywords list there. Okay, Now, Indian Ocean, sunrise, coast. Yeah, so I've got coast, but not, I've got coastal, but not coast. So there's added in. I've done a lot of kind of coastal work in South Africa, so that's why all the South African stuff's coming in. But the rest of that stuff wouldn't apply. So I'll just ignore that. Okay. So that's keywording. And there's also keyword lists. You can actually kind of set up hierarchies of keyword as well. So if you, for instance, if you set up a hierarchy of keywords, you might set up Ireland, Leinster, Dublin, yeah, as a hierarchy. Well, then if you put in Dublin, it'll also put in Leinster and Ireland for you. But you could put in other place names under Leinster as well, and any of those would also apply to apply Dublin as a keyword and Ireland as a keyword. So if you can get pretty fancy with keywords if you want to. There's the new file name that we created on import. There's the original file name, okay, that came straight out of the camera. So you never lose that. But this is the new name of the file in terms of Windows Explorer seeing it, or Finder on the Mac seeing it, or whatever. It's the one that you created. Okay. And then you've got, how big it is and all the various types of information. So this is called metadata. This is information that's stored alongside the actual picture. Yeah. And there's a lot of metadata in here. You can see that the pixel dimensions, okay? What was the exposure? This was a 75-second exposure at f13, yeah? It was shot at ISO 64 on a Nikon camera, the Nikon D810. That's even the serial number of the camera, okay? So all this information is stored alongside the image. And you might think, well, I don't care about that. Yeah, but that information can be used later to search for your images. So I can go back in using some of the features in the library module and find all the shots that were shot at f13, or all the shots that were shot on a D810 in February 2019. So I can interrogate the keyword data and the metadata to actually search for images, and that's really, really powerful. Okay. Now we're doing 2:42. So we started at 2. We've done 45 minutes. Melanie, when do you want us to break? Do you want us to break around now for 10 minutes, or do you want to run up to the top of the hour? Or
shall we go to the top of the hour?
We'll go to the top of the hour then, and then we'll take a 10-minute break.
Small break, yeah.
And then I'll do right. Okay, that's super, lovely. Well, given that I've got kind of about an hour and a half, less than 10 minutes, then we've probably spent about half the time in the library module so far. So why don't we flick into the develop module and do a little bit on develop now, and then we can do some more detail on both modules for the second one of these workshops, which is coming up in a week or two, I think, isn't it? All right, well, let's go edit this picture then. Okay, so to edit a shot, most of the time you're going to do most of your editing in what's called the develop module, which is the next one along. Okay, and the shortcut key just to open this the image in the develop module, I can click on develop, but I like shortcut keys, and the shortcut key is D for develop. Okay, so I press on D, and it moves us along into the develop module now. Remember what I said earlier on about Lightroom being non-destructive. If you look over on the left-hand panel now, so we've got the little thumbnail, but we've got this tab called History. Okay, and the history shows that this is the file that we've just imported without any changes made. Yeah. So let me just make a couple of quick changes. Let me raise the exposure. Okay. And let me darken the highlights. Okay, I'm just making these at random for now. Okay, look what's happening in the history over here. So there's my imported file, and if I hover over it, you can see that the navigator at the top here shows the state of the file on import. So it would look like that. And then the next thing that we did to the file was we raised the exposure by plus 101.95 stops. Okay, exposure plus 1.95. Okay, so that made it look like that. And then if I raise the mouse up to the next bit, the highlights, then there's the highlights. So now we pull the highlights down by 75. And these are being written into the DNG file in a little kind of area where the changes to the original raw file are stored. Okay, so it's not changing the original raw file, that's still there untouched, but it's recording these two changes in another little bit of the DNG file. If you don't create DNG files on import, so if you just import an F file, okay, what Lightroom does is it creates a second file. As soon as you start to edit the file, it creates a second file with the same file name, okay, so that prefix of the file name, but instead of .nef or .cr2, the suffix after the dot is .xmp. Okay, so if you've looked in Windows Explorer or you've looked in Finder at your folder and you see all your original files with .nef, and then you see all these other files, yeah, with .xmp, those XMP files are Lightroom's way of recording the changes, the edits that you've made. If you lose the XMP file, you've not lost your raw file. It's still there. You can still go back and re-edit it, but you'll have lost your changes because Lightroom will not know what those changes were. The XMP file just stores this history. Okay, so that if you didn't know what the XMP files were, that's what it. And they're tiny little text files. So don't worry about them in terms of size. You know, I know it's a lot more files in the folder, but they're just so small that it doesn't make any difference. Okay, so let's just put this back to 0. Okay, now I can just drag each thing back to the center, yeah, but there's a quicker way. To get a slider here back to the center, just hover over the little handle there and double click, and that zeroes it, puts it back into the middle. Okay, and if you've got loads of these different sliders in a tab, like basic tab here, so I've got 1, 2, 3 of those. So if I, rather than double clicking 3 times, if I go up to where it says tone, okay, or presence, yeah, and I press the Alt key, Alt on a Mac, Option on a Windows, okay, reset tone, and it will reset all those sliders to 0 in one go. So I'm holding the Alt key down, and then I'm clicking on where it says reset. Bang. Okay, and now I'm back to the picture looking like it did before I'd made any of those changes. Okay, so now I can start my edit. Now I can decide what to do. So at this point, what I normally do is I normally just close off this left-hand panel. You see there's tiny little left-hand arrow there. That is, you've got one of those on each of the panels, and you can close any of those panels down. So if you don't need to see these titles and you want a bit more screen real estate, you can shut that top one down. Yeah, there's a bottom panel which has the film strip view of all the images in the folder. Okay, I don't generally use that a whole lot, so generally I'll leave that closed. And then the left hand and the right hand panels, this one's got the history and this, which is useful sometimes, but most of the time when I'm editing, I'm going to close that down and edit in the left hand side here, and then use the sliders in these different tabs, because this is where all the action is for develop. Here's a little trick that you might not be aware of. You can widen this panel, so you can make it narrower or you can make it wider. Okay, but it'll only go that wide. No, it won't. It'll go wider. Okay, move the cursor till you get to that little kind of double-headed arrow thing. Okay, now it's that magic key again. The magic key in Lightroom to unlock untold riches is the Alt key, Alt or Option. So if I press the Alt key on my Mac or the Option key on a Windows machine, now I can drag as wide as I like with that. Okay, and some people like to open up this tab on the right quite a long way, because look how long now those sliders have got. They've doubled in length. So that means that those sliders, you can make far more fine adjustments with the sliders once they're wider. Now you lose a bit of screen size over here, but if that helps you in terms of getting it just right, then that's a good way to do it. To be honest, most of the time I don't need to do it. I'll leave it. I'll just leave it at the normal size. Okay, but if you do want to do it, Alt or Option key and drag, and that will bring you up. Okay. I reckon I've got probably a little bit of a blue cast to this image. I'm pretty sure this was shot with a 10-stop ND filter, because it's a long exposure, 75 seconds. So it was probably my 10 or my 15 stop. So one of the first things I might do is just check my color balance. Okay. Now you can do this by eye. Okay. So here's the temperature, and as I'm shooting raw, I have complete control over my white balance for the image. So, I try and get it right in camera, but if you do get it wrong and you're shooting raw, it actually doesn't matter, because you can just go and fix it. So if I want to make this image look a bit warmer and get rid of those cold blue tones, I can just move this slider to the right, and you'll see now, let's go way too far. You see now it's gone really, really warm. Yeah. And now it's kind of coming back to perhaps where it should be, something like that. But I started off over here with that quite a bluey kind of cast, especially to the clouds and stuff. And I think that came from my filter. So that you can do it by eye that way. Now that's really dangerous for me particularly, because I'm colorblind. So I'm probably going to end up with a magenta sky or something and think it looks fantastic until Penny comes in and looks over my shoulder and winces. Probably one of the reasons I shoot a lot of black and white. But this makes that much easier. So this dropper tool allows you to set the white balance by choosing a mid-tone gray or a complete white or a complete black. Okay, so let's say these rocks were kind of mid-tone gray. I can just move the dropper over it until I get something that's kind of fairly lightish gray under the center point of that little grid, something like that. Pick a target neutral, and if I click on that now, you'll see the whole color balance of the image shift, and probably the temperature slider there, yeah, you'll probably see it shift a bit to the right. So as I click, watch that little temperature slider. Yeah, okay, so you saw it jumped from here to here. Okay, so now what it's done is Lightroom has figured out, well, if that's a mid-tone gray, and I know what mid-tone gray should look like, then the other colors in the image we can adjust appropriately. So that's a really easy way of shooting and getting an image that's pretty much white or color corrected straight away. Yeah, you may have come across these little cards that you can get. Color balance cards with a white card and a mid-tone gray and a black card. Yeah, and if this is going to be particularly important that you get the white balance absolutely right, all you need to do is just put that card in shot for one of your shots. Yeah. Now, as long as the light's not changing kind of too rapidly. Yeah. So if I put that a white card or a mid-tone gray card just on the rock or on the ground down here, just took a shot, then I could come back in, pop the dropper over the card on the ground, or if your model's holding it up next to their face or whatever, and that nails the color balance for you. So you're starting off right. Easy thing to do. Recently, they brought in color profiles. Okay. There's always been something up here, but what they did, I think about 9 months ago or so, was they brought in profiles. So Adobe, these are the kind of Lightroom profiles. Okay, so that's the general color one. If I click on this one, you see it changes and just gives a bit more of a contrast on the rocks. So maybe making the clouds a bit bluer. There's a standard profile. There's a vivid one. Yeah, and there's a black and white one. Okay, so these are kind of like just presets. And then there's some raw ones. And normally there's ones from the camera. So this one's shot on Nikon. So the kind of Nikon profiles that are in the Nikon cameras, yeah, these are attempting to match those in-camera profiles. Yeah, so portrait, neutral, standard, and then different monochrome ones and stuff like that. I know that a lot of people shoot Fuji and they absolutely love the black and white color profiles, because you're shooting across, or you're shooting portrait, or whatever it is, and it kind of like gives the same effect to some of the old films and things like that. They're there. I never use them. I don't like using the kind of preset profiles, because I enjoy doing the other stuff too much. When a shot comes in, I want to give it my stamp. I want to process it in the way that I want to see the image, the final image. And there's a school of thought that says you should get everything right in camera, but to be honest, if you're shooting raw, that's almost impossible to do, because the raw file is inherently flat. If you shoot JPEG, you're applying post-processing, you're just doing it in camera. You're just letting the camera sharpen it and saturate it and all the rest of it. So shooting raw, you come in, it looks relatively flat, and you always then need to do a bit of post-processing to kind of get the best out of the file. But to me, that's a major part of the fun of shooting digital. So that's what I would do. So the first thing I would do always, certainly with these kind of landscapey shots, is just check that my horizon was straight. Most of the time I'm going to be shooting on a tripod, so I would hope that it's pretty straight, but I would go into the crop tool, which is this one on the top left-hand corner. And the shortcut key to get into the crop tool isn't C, as you might think, it's R. So R for crop, and that opens up the crop tool. There we are. And when your crop tool opens up, what you might see is this pretty regularly, or another of the overlays, because there's a lot of different overlays. This one's the rule of thirds overlay, but if I press the O key, okay, I can cycle around all the different overlays. So there's another one, pressing the O key, press it again. Okay, so these are all different ways of kind of helping you to kind of decide what you want where in your image. And I can cycle through all these different overlays by pressing the O key until I get back to the rule of thirds. Okay, so if I want to compose this shot using the rule of thirds, say, now I can use the corners and the drag handles. So let's say that the sky is not really the interesting bit here, is it? We've got nice sea, we've got nice foreground rock. So let's drag down and put the horizon line on the thirds line. Yeah, look, and now my line's on the island there. I can see that my horizon line is just slightly off. It needs rotating a little bit. Okay, so number of ways to do that. Okay, I can just come outside the crop area, and now I've got that little double-headed arrow, and I can just rotate. Okay, so I can rotate my image until the line is right, but it's quite difficult to get it perfect like that. Okay, so let's leave it off. Okay, now another way is to use this slider, which is similar to doing what we just did. So that just lets you free rotate. Yeah, but probably the best way, especially if you've got a horizontal line, as we have here, we've got the sea. So click on the angle tool, put the crosshairs on the line of the sea, click and drag. And now you're drawing a line, and you can draw that line along as much of the sea horizon line as you can find, which is probably to there. Okay. And now when I release, it's going to make that line horizontal. Right. Okay. So now my shot is horizontal. And now I can recrop and put the crop line dead on the horizon line. Okay. And now I know that I'm good. And then I can decide whether I want, maybe a little bit less in the foreground, something like this. Yeah. There's a little mantra that I use when I am doing kind of composition workshops, or even like now, when you're recomposing by cropping, subject, background, corners. Okay, so what's your subject, and my subject here is kind of the island, but it's the rocks and the water with the island in the background. So that's the main thing that I'm interested in. But then as I crop, where do I want the different elements in my scene? Where do I want, what do I want primed? And if you like, what am I letting go a little bit? So I'm not that interested in the sky in this one. So I'm going to keep the horizon line on my third once I've done that crop again. I like the foreground, but I didn't like these bright rocks here. So that's why I cropped up to get rid of those. So subject, I'm happy with this kind of area. Background, I didn't like that. And then I'm just going to do a check around the edges and see if anything annoying has come in. Okay, so I might think that little dark patch there, just crawling into the edge, was annoying. So I might just crop in a little bit there. Okay, so you just scan your edges and your corners. I'm going to darken this off a little bit later as well, but that would probably be where I wanted to go. And then it really depends with your cropping what you want to do with this afterwards. Okay, so if you want to, I mean, quite often I'll be displaying my stuff, just on my local, my TV in the kitchen at home, just as a slideshow. So I'll very often crop to 16:9. So that's roughly 16:9, I think. So let's go and have a look. There's the custom crop at the moment. But if I go down and choose 16:9 as a ratio, yeah, so I'm not far off the 16:9 crop. It's just a little bit more squeezed in. So now I can just decide, where I want the different elements in this frame. I quite like that line coming in of that rock. So I might move it just slightly to the right, something like that. But then you see I'm losing the edge of that rock. So now I'm going to come back a bit and put that rock there. And that would be my crop. Okay. So right, I'm 2 minutes past 3. Now's probably a good time for a quick break, Melanie, if that's
okay, that's great. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we're just going to put a slide up to say when we should come back.
Fine. I think we're going to run 10 minutes. Just let everybody have a cup of coffee, and then we'll carry on editing. Okay. See you in a little while.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. Golly, I can't believe it. 241 participants. I've never seen a number like that in the Zoom call. Amazing. Right. Will I share again?
Yes.
Let's do that. Do we get to can we capture the Q&A, Melanie, so that we, because there's a few of those that I think we could probably add to the next workshop, so that I can maybe answer questions that we don't cover today in the next workshop. So if we can capture the text that's come up in the Q&A in some way.
I'm sure that's fine. I will talk to the team.
Yeah, super.
Yes, that will all be captured in a text file.
Ah, fantastic.
Excellent.
That's great.
Thank you.
Okay. Are you seeing my Lightroom again?
Yes, that's right. Yeah, good.
Fantastic.
Thank
okay.
you.
Well, I'll carry on then.
Over to you.
Yeah. Super. Thank you very much. Trevor's got a question there. 2:48 p.m. If you reset the picture, can you delete the history if you don't need it? Well, let's have a go, Trevor. So if I bring out the left-hand tab, we can see that there is all the image changes that we made, and as you go back down them, you see the crop changes we were making and stuff like that. Yeah. Now, if I go back down to where we imported the shot and I click on that again, it resets the picture to where we were. And the same goes for anywhere, into the history. So, I mean, if I just wanted to go back to that point in the history, I could go. Now, if I make a change now, it will erase everything above this point. Yeah, so that's one way of doing it. You can also do things like snapshots where you can keep a history point and then branch away, but that's more complicated. So basically, if you want to undo any of your history, then just go down until you've got to the point of the history where you want to undo it to. Maybe we didn't want that custom white balance applying or whatever. Go back to there, click on it, and now we can make changes from there. And all this stuff above it will immediately disappear. So that's the easiest way of doing that. But as I say, we're not making changes to the original raw file. We're just writing the history of these changes into a space next to the raw file or into that XMP file. So I'm going to keep my changes for now because I'm happy with where we were going so far. Okay. I enlarged the cursors for these workshops. I just got myself a little Mac app that makes bigger cursors. It's not a Lightroom feature. That's an external thing that I just got for the Mac. So the basic tab is where most people live. Okay. And what the basic tab does, I'll just shut down the left-hand panel again, is lets you do basic edits to the whole image. Okay, so all these sliders here affect the whole image. Okay, so exposure, yeah, it's already quite bright, but if I take the exposure up to the right, it's brightening up the whole image. If I take it down, it's darkening the whole image. Yeah, and if you don't know about histograms, this is a lovely tool to have open, and it may not be open on your Lightroom. It might be like this. So you see these little left-hand arrow, left-facing arrow there next to histogram. I can open that up like that, and now that's open, and you can see the histogram. And the histogram is one of the most useful tools in photography. I mean, there's one in your camera somewhere, and you can certainly on all the mirrorless cameras that I know of, you can have a live histogram showing you exactly what your exposure is going to be. Yeah, and it's very, very useful when you are kind of changing the exposure in Lightroom, because you can see if I move the exposure to say there, okay, I've got nothing on the left hand side, which is complete black. I've got nothing on the right hand side, which would be complete white, blown highlights. What I've done is I've adjusted the exposure from its original, which is like this, where I'm getting very close to kind of blowing some of the white out of the sky here. And I've just pulled it all back a bit just to darken off some of those whiter tones and bring all the tones into the middle. Yeah, but you can do a lot more than that. So exposure is just quite a blunt instrument. It's the whole thing. Okay, so let me double click and center that back. Contrast I hardly ever use in Lightroom, because there's much better ways of getting tonal adjustments going with finer detail. So I'm not going to really play with contrast, but these four, now this is where the magic happens. Okay, highlights. Okay, if I move through the histogram, yeah, you'll see different sliders highlight. Okay, so let me start on the left-hand side. You see this left-hand section of the histogram here? The black slider is highlighted. If I move to the right, the next one that highlights up is shadows. And then the midtones is generally where the exposure slider kind of controls. And then the next one over is highlights, and the one after that is whites. So whites, highlights, midtone exposure, yeah, shadows, blacks. So let's just say I'm looking at these rocks and here, these very dark areas. Yeah. And what I want to do is I just want to bring those areas out, but I don't really want to affect the brighter areas of the sea and the sky. Well, if I use exposure to bring out those darker areas, yeah, certainly it's bringing out the darker areas, but it's also blowing out all the rest of the picture. So I don't want to do that. But if I use, say, shadows, watch what happens. Okay. So now it's bringing out the darker shadow areas. It's affecting this side of the histogram, but it's not affecting this side of the histogram. It's not affecting the sky because that's too bright to be affected by the shadows. Okay. So you've got a lot more control over different bands of tonal range within the shot by playing with, for instance, the blacks. Yeah, so I can darken the blacks without affecting the highlights and the bright tones. I can bring out the shadows more. See, so we're getting our detail in that rock there. We're getting detail in here. We're getting detail in here, but we're not blowing out the whites in the sky. Now, the whites in the sky here look a bit too bright to me. So if I go to highlights, okay, Now it's just going to tone down these really bright areas, but it won't affect the dark areas that we were just playing with shadows. So if I pull highlights down, okay, now look what you see it's doing to the clouds. It's bringing back some of that detail in the cloud. We're starting to see that there's this kind of almost lenticular cloud formation in the sky here. Okay, now got to be careful, because what I'm also seeing as I go from there to there, that's a lot of difference that we're making with the highlights. And maybe it's starting to make these clouds a little bit too defined and a little bit too crunchy. So especially when you're working with clouds and sky, go easy on this stuff. Go a little bit lighter on it than going too heavy on it. Yeah. So I'd pull the highlights down a little bit, something like that. Now, if the highlights just weren't doing it enough, but I still want to bring that sky down, then what I've got to do is I've got to go to what's called a more targeted adjustment. And a targeted adjustment is where you just pick an area of the picture and you're making adjustments just to that area. And those go on up here. Okay, so just above the general adjustments, we're getting these targeted adjustments. Okay, and the one that I would do there, because the sky, that area is a good block, I'm going to use the graduated filter. So I click on graduated filter, and the shortcut key for that is M. Okay, and that gives me a little cross. Now what I want to do is I want to put a line down pretty much dead on that horizon line. Yeah. So if I click and drag down, you'll see that we're going to get this kind of like faded line, and it's quite difficult to keep it straight. It's like an old biplane going left and right, isn't it? Yeah. If I want to keep it straight while I'm drawing down, if I hold the Shift key down as I drag, okay, that will keep it absolutely horizontal. So you can see that the mask, yeah, is coming down from the top. Yeah. So what we're going to do here is we're going to be affecting the sky down to that point there. And now I take my finger off and the mask is applied. Now it's got all white because over here I've got the exposure pulled all the way to the right. Okay. So there's our mask for our graduated filter with blown out sky, completely blown out. So let's pull the exposure back. And as I pull it back, we'll get our sky back. Okay. And now I can pull back even further and darken off the whole of the sky. Yeah. And let's go quite way too far. Yeah. And now you see it's only affecting that area that I just masked. And if I want it to go down a bit further, say, I can just pull that central line down and maybe just bring it down to the horizon line. Yeah. So what happens is this is completely kind of whatever you choose here is completely applied in that top area. And then you go from completely applied to 75% applied on the middle line. And from 75%, so the last 25% is applied in the bottom half of the graduated filter. Okay. And if I want that to be just a really hard line, what I would do there is I would bring down using that dot that drags the filter down, drag it down right onto the horizon line, that central line. Yeah. And then if I hold the Alt key down or the Option key, yeah, now I can drag in either from the top or the bottom line, and it will leave the central line exactly where it is, and it'll bring the other two together. Okay. So I'm holding the Alt key. So that stops it moving the center line. So now I can really make that pretty much a perfect line. Yeah. And now the changes that I'm making are on the sky, but they're just going to be straight down onto the horizon line, stuff like that. So you've got a lot of control over this stuff, a lot of control. And I don't have to just change exposure. I could change the whites, say, and just darken the whites a bit, or I could darken just the highlights here and just bring those clouds out even more. Okay. And I might do that with a shot like this. I might darken off the sky quite a bit more and really make the sea, you know, the real fun bit. If, like me, sometimes when I'm doing these edits, I find these lines, you know, with either this filter, the line here on the horizon, it's a bit distracting and I can't quite see, you know, the whole image. If you just want to hide the lines of the filter while you're doing your edits, H, okay, makes those go away. So it's still there, and you're still in the graduated filter tool because it's highlighted, okay, but you've just hidden the lines of the graduated filter so you can see where your edit is working. You want to bring them back, just press H again, and it just brings them back. Okay, so that's pretty cool. But let's say that was where we were happy with that graduated filter. Then we just click on the graduated filter tool now, and that one is now finished. And now we can do something different. So I might, for instance, want to just darken this rock down in the bottom left-hand corner. It's kind of just pulling the eye in. So I just want to darken this particular area off. So I'm going to take a radial filter. Okay, shortcut key, Shift and M. Okay, right, so now it's highlighted, and as I go in, I've got my little cross again. But rather than dragging down a straight line now, when I click somewhere in the image and drag, so click and drag, it drags out a circle or an oval, depending on what you want to do. An oval, unless you're holding the Shift key down. Okay. So there's an oval that I'm dragging out, which is going to be about the same size as that rock. But actually, I want the exposure change to be on the inside of the radial filter, not the outside. Yeah. So I can tell it to invert the effect. There's a little inversion down here. Okay, so if I click in the invert option there, then you'll see now that is on the inside. Okay, so invert. Outside, inside. And the shortcut key, because I find actually that's a tiny little box to hit with my mouse, yeah, but the shortcut key that does exactly the same thing as clicking inside that box is the apostrophe key. So outside, inside. And I'm using the apostrophe key on the keyboard now. Okay. So there's my radial filter. And I can now grab it and I can drag it down here, and I can even drag it off, yeah, so that it's really just affecting that rock. Now, I don't want the rock brighter, I want the rock darker. So there it is, and now I'm going to pull the exposure down back to 0, yeah, and then maybe I just want to pull it down a little bit more and just darken it off, just like that. So you see we've gone there 0.7 of a stop. So just 3/4 of a stop, and it stops that rock being just that, it's just catching my eye in the bottom left-hand corner. I just pull it back like that, and it's just darkened it off to kind of the same darkness as these other rocks, but just in that localized area. Yeah. So it's the radial filter is an incredibly powerful tool and an unused tool by many people, but I use it all the time. I think it's probably my favorite bit of Lightroom is the radial filter. You know, if there was one tool that I could keep, that would be the one. And you can make all kinds of changes with this. So let's click off it and then click another radial, bring another radial filter up. Let's say I want to bring these rocks out a bit more. I want to bring the detail out in these rocks a bit more. So I'm going to click and drag a radial filter over this area. Hit the apostrophe key again, just to bring it in, and I don't want all that crazy exposure. Okay, so the radial filter is still sitting there. Okay, and now I can start to apply stuff within that radial filter. There's a feather here. Okay, and the feather. So let me apply that exposure again, just so that we can see where the radial filter is. There we are. So if I put the feather up down to 0, there's a really hard line appears on that radial filter. You can see that's where it's applied. So normally the feather it defaults to 50%, but quite often what I'll do is I'll just knock the feather up all the way. Okay, so that the changes that you make are really softened, so that you just don't see where the edges of the changes that you're making are. Yeah. So you can see now it's really feathering those changes on the outside. Yeah. But the changes are still being applied here in terms of exposure. So, the exposure is a great way to see what you're actually doing. Now, if you don't want to kind of use exposure to see what's happening, another way of seeing what's happening is just to hover over the center of the radial filter for a second, and then you get this overlay. Okay. Now, I think that's green at the moment, isn't it? And remember, I'm colorblind, but I can cycle between white, black, red, and green using Shift and O. So as I'm hovered over that central dot, yeah, for 2 or 3 seconds, then the color overlay comes in and shows where whatever changes you're going to make are going to affect. And you can change the color of that overlay mask, if you like, by Shift and O. Okay, so I can cycle around between those different colors. See, the red is the default. Most times it comes up in red, but I barely see red. So I normally have it set to green, which I can see much more easily. Okay. So as you come off it now, it'll just put the radial filter back to no color over there. So now what I want to do is I want to bring out the detail in these rocks. So let's try clarity. Let's see what clarity gives us. Now look at that. Clarity and rocks are like ham and eggs. I mean, this is, clarity is made for rocks. Okay, and it's midtone contrast clarity, which is rock typically. So bang it all the way up, yeah, or as far as you want it, yeah. And there's a lot of difference there. You see this little toggle switch in the bottom left-hand corner of the thing. If I toggle that off and on, it shows you the before and after with the radial filters. Yeah, and you're also seeing that one, the before and after. Yeah, so that's before, and that's after. Yeah. So sometimes these are quite subtle changes, but probably when you're editing shots, most of the time, you want your changes to be relatively subtle, because if they're unsubtle, people know that you've made changes, and then it just looks like a processed shot. Whereas a really well processed shot doesn't look like it's been processed. Yeah. So that's what you're going to do. So when you're doing rocks and stuff, clarity is fantastic. Yeah. And you might say, well, I love the clarity on on these rocks. I want it on these as well. So you could now say, well, let's just grow that radial filter right across the bottom here. Yeah, let's pull it across, and let's just pull it right across and apply that clarity across the whole of that rock area. And now you see they're all getting that different clarity. Turn it off. Turn it on. Bang. So you're getting much more contrast in the rock, which makes them stand out better. And from a compositional point of view, this works because we've got now sharp, non-moving rock and moss in the foreground. Then we've got mid-ground, we've got the softness of the long exposure water and the ethereal look of the water. And then towards the back, we've got then, the sky, which in this case we've gone dark with, but we might have gone, light or whatever, and made it fade into the line, or we've in this case chosen to go dark with. So you're adjusting. An image should tell a story a lot of the time. So where do you want the viewer to go in the image, and how do you want them to journey through your image, and where do you want them to end up in your image? I think I probably want them to end up in these rocks here, but to kind of almost go out to sea and then come back. So that's how I would do that. I'm conscious of the time, Melanie. You said wrap up around 3:30 and then take questions. So my
indeed,
Alexa is telling me
we do have
3:31.
Indeed. We do have quite a lot of questions. So,
I can see, yeah. So
I
do you want
sort of
have you kind of curated them? Do you want to throw a few at me, and we'll see what we'll see whether I can answer anything.
We have to a certain extent. Do you want to stay screen sharing because you might wish to
right
show?
Okay.
Might
I'll do that. Yeah.
So everyone is aware where they can ask the question, but we do have a lot to get through, so probably.
Yeah. And as I say, what we'll do is we'll review all the questions in the Q&A. I'll have a look through the text file when I'm looking at what I'm going to cover for the next workshop. There's a few questions already I've kind of responded and sent in the next workshop. So if we don't get to your question today, we'll do our best to cover, as many of the questions that we didn't get to in the next workshop.
Excellent. So I have one from Robert Dreamer. How do I add copyright data to files already in Lightroom?
Okay, good question. Right. Well, let's go back into the grid view. So G for grid takes us back from develop into the Lightroom library module, and you can see that is so we're back into library in the grid view. Okay, so let's say that we hadn't put our details in for this image. So there's no preset applied. Well, down here in the metadata, here's all the metadata fields. So let's say that I want to put in, the artist is, I haven't got anything in there at the moment because I forgot to apply the preset on import. Okay, well then I can go in here, okay, and I can set up a new preset. That's one way of doing it. So you can go in and apply a preset. So if I want to say, well, actually, I didn't take this shot, Penny took this shot. So I'll apply that preset. And now that preset contains Penny's details. Now you see the artist is shown as Penny Howe. Okay, so that's probably the easiest way of doing it. And you can also do that for all of them. So if I shift and click, choose all four, now I can choose that preset, Penny Houghton, and I can say synchronize it. Okay, synchronize the settings. Make sure all the boxes that you want are ticked that you want to synchronize. And now it will synchronize those settings across all the selected images. So the presets are very, very powerful. So I hope that answers that question. I think it does.
Nigel Cherry asks, does Lightroom work well with the Canon R5 RAW files, CR3? I heard the colors are not properly treated.
I don't know. I don't shoot Canon. I haven't had hands on the R5. If somebody does have that and knows more, maybe pop it in the Q&A as an answer at the bottom for that question. But no, I'm not going to bluff and say I know what I don't. So no, I can't answer that one.
Jeanette Russell. Apply during import. Does this impact the backup or just the non-backup images?
No, it's applied to the images on import. So as the images come in from your card, the data, the metadata and the keywords and the things that you said you want to apply during the import get applied. And then once they've been applied, then the images are dumped into your hard drive on the C drive and also onto your backup machine with the images changed, with the new metadata applied. So yeah, you'd have the metadata in both places. Yes.
Okay, Carmel Duncan, she asks, the thing I've never quite understood about import is whether it is creating another catalogue, duplicating images in a different location, or simply linking to the existing location. I've been using Adobe Bridge as a means of cataloging, and I'm not sure how they interact. I can edit straight into Camera Raw from there, but if I want to edit in Lightroom, it seems I have to import them again. If I import into Lightroom, can I still view the catalog in Bridge?
Okay. Bridge was something that Adobe brought out a long time ago. It's pre-Lightroom days, and it's still around, and it's still a good, cataloging and browsing tool. They developed Lightroom to replace Bridge. Okay, so actually, there's a very well-known photographer in the US called Scott Kelby. Most of you probably heard of Scott Kelby. And he wrote an amazing blog post, which is up on his website, 100 reasons why you should be using Lightroom and not Bridge. And he lists 100 different reasons why you should be using Lightroom and not Bridge. So, just Google Scott Kelby, 100 reasons Lightroom or whatever, and you'll find that article. The import isn't creating another catalog. No, the images are placed in the location that you specify when you import them. So if you copy them now, if they're already on the hard drive, okay, you don't copy or copy as DNG. If they're already on your existing hard drive and all you want to do is add them to the catalog, i.e. tell Lightroom that these images already exist on your hard disk in a particular location, then what you do is, rather than in the import dialog choosing the SD card, which is an external drive, you choose the folder on the existing hard drive where the images already are. Yeah, Lightroom doesn't know about them yet. And then you just click on Add. And what that does, it adds the location data of the images into Lightroom, i.e. the file card saying that Lightroom holds about the image, saying this image is in this folder. Okay, so that way you're not duplicating the images, you're just telling Lightroom that the images exist in that place. Now, if that's what you do, Carmel, then you should be able to tell Lightroom to find all your images on your whole hard drive, and then you can keyword and you can search and you can edit and stuff, and you never need to go near Bridge again. And Lightroom is way more powerful than Bridge. So we can always have a chat. We can always have a chat about that offline. If anybody wants to kind of contact me offline, I don't know whether we can share my email address with everybody through the chat or something, Melanie. Quite happy to give my email address out. Yeah, actually the chat's up there, isn't it? Yeah. So if you guys want to put joe.houghton@gmail.com into the chat, you can drop me a line and we can follow up offline on any of these particular complicated issues. That's not a problem.
Okay, this is from Brian. Import view. What are the yellow bars to the right of the source directory?
Okay. You're talking about these little tiny yellow bars here, I think. So in the navigator, I like to, there's certain folders that I go to pretty regularly. Okay. And if you right click on a folder in the structure here, you can go down and you can add a color label to the folder. All right. Now, I don't see red, so I don't use red, but I see yellow really well. So that's what I've done. I've added a color label to those folders. And then it just means I pick them up quicker. So print photos, I've got 10,500 shots in my print photos folder with subfolders. So I have a yellow label, so I can just click on it and go straight to it. So that's all that's for. And you can also search. You can also in the top here, but we'll do that next time. We'll have a look at how we search for images using keywords and different ways of doing that in the second workshop. So I'll keep that one for the second workshop.
Okay. Graham asks, if you want to add a completely new file on an external hard drive into which you want to import, is that done in the same way as you added the 02 February folder?
Yeah, so let's say I had a new hard drive, a USB drive or something that I'd bought and I'd put some new photos on. Yeah, well then I would come into Lightroom here, and rather than my MacBook Pro C drive, I would click a plus here, okay, and I would add a folder, okay, and then what it's going to do is bring up Finder. So it just takes a second to fire up Finder or Windows Explorer. Yeah. And then I would navigate down in my Finder or your Windows Explorer. And down here, would be the new drive. Okay. So I've got my MacBook Pro C drive. I've got the Nikon D810, which is that SD card that I've got in. Houghton 1 is my NAS drive that's currently connected. And if you plugged in your external USB, that would be showing up as, drive E or drive F or whatever. Okay, so you just click on that and add it into Lightroom. And now Lightroom would read it and, you allow you to import the folders and the photos and stuff, and it would be now seen in Lightroom. And that's what I've got when I've got all these other things. You see 16 gig flash, 4 terabyte Western Digital Elements. So that's an external hard drive that isn't connected at the moment, but has got all these images on. Okay. And you can see that it's not connected because they're all question marks at the moment. So it says they're here, and I've got little thumbnails of them all, but you can't do anything with them at the moment because that drive isn't connected. So I hope that answers Graham. Yeah, I can see his question now. Yeah.
Steve Wall has a couple of questions. Do you back your catalogue up as well?
Oh, yes.
So how? And how big disk space is your catalogue?
Your catalogue.
600,000 plus photos.
It's 8 gigabytes, which is not huge. It's a terabyte hard drive. 1,000 gigabytes is a terabyte. I think mine's a 1 terabyte drive. 8 gig. Now, absolutely, I back up my catalogue. My catalogue I keep in my Dropbox folder, in a folder called Lightroom. Okay, so Dropbox Lightroom. So whenever the Lightroom catalog is edited or changed, while I'm working, it's synchronized back out into the cloud. So if my machine dies, my Lightroom catalog is safe. And Dropbox also maintains version controls as well. So there's multiple versions of the catalog automatically saved as well. The key thing with your catalog is that the catalog file itself, which is the .lrcat file, should be on your fastest local drive, because that's the thing that Lightroom is talking to all the time. Okay, so if you've got your Lightroom catalog on an external drive or on a NAS drive, Lightroom will be painfully slow. Yeah, you keep your catalog file on your fastest drive, and if you've got an SSD card, drive or whatever, you put it on that, and Lightroom will be much more responsive in that case. So.
Okay.
So there we are.
Michelle Spender says, if you import your Adobe Elements catalog to Lightroom, will it intelligently add any keywords or metadata?
I would expect it to. I don't know because I haven't tried. What I would try, Michelle, is just importing a small subset of it, just a couple of folders or whatever, and see whether your keywords and metadata from that little import actually come across. But they're both Adobe products, and normally Adobe's pretty good at making Adobe products talk to each other with all the relevant data. So I would be surprised if it didn't, but hand on heart, I can't actually tell you.
There's a couple of questions here. I don't know whether you will cover these in the next one. Can you explain the use of keyword sets? And how do you find missing files? I think you said you're going to cover that next time.
Yeah, the keyword sets is probably a little bit complicated for now, given that these are supposed to be just very introductory kind of talks on Lightroom. But basically, when you set keyword sets up, you're setting a hierarchy of keywords up, like I explained with the Ireland, Leinster, Dublin, country, county, city kind of thing. And when you choose a keyword that's anywhere lower in the hierarchy, it adds in all the other words from upwards in the hierarchy to the keywords. But yeah, I wasn't planning to go through that in detail. There's a lady who you can look up, and she's written a couple of brilliant books on Lightroom and maintains them up to date all the time. Her name's Victoria Bampton, and on kind of on the internet she's known as the Lightroom Queen. I would highly recommend Victoria's stuff. She's got a brilliant website. She's done some phenomenal books and things on Lightroom. And I mean, if you think I'm a bit of a Lightroom guru, I mean, I'm just a babe in arms compared to Victoria. So yeah, if I can't answer a question, Victoria will have the answer at some on her website somewhere. Yeah.
Can you adjust? Peter Bozeman asks, can you adjust the font size in Lightroom?
Oh, you mean in terms of kind of like this tiny little stuff here? I don't know whether you can adjust the font size in here. You can certainly adjust the font size in like the print module for, you know, when you're writing stuff onto images. The only way that I know of making stuff bigger in terms of like the panels and the image data that's showing up is to actually change the resolution of your screen. I'm on a MacBook Pro, and I've got it set to the very highest resolution I can have, which makes everything look a little small when you're reading stuff. So if you adjust your screen resolution to a slightly lower resolution, then the writing will get bigger in Lightroom. But as far as I know, there isn't any way of actually changing the text size of the stuff that goes on in the boxes. No.
Trevor James asks about enlarging the cursors. I think you said that was an app.
That's right. That was just an app that I got for the Mac. Yeah.
Can you name that in the chat?
I have no idea, but okay. I'll see if we'll find it for next time and put that in.
Lovely. Mary Auckland asks, if you update, what do you need to save beforehand, e.g. your own settings, particular custom settings and presets?
Yeah, there's a whole series of files in the Lightroom catalog. I mean, the most important file, actually the only one that you have to save, is the .lrcat file. Okay, so that's your main catalog file. And when Lightroom is updated, sometimes they update the structure of the catalog file and stuff. So it's good to have a backup of that before you do any update. All the other files are actually ones that can be regenerated, the previews file and stuff like that. So the only fundamentally important one that you mustn't lose and you know mustn't get corrupted is your actual Lightroom catalog. So have a few backups of that dotted around the place, and you know keep those relatively up to date. But apart from that, the other ones are all reproduced. You can all recreate all the other ones. So I generally just back up everything in the Lightroom folder, all the different catalog files before I do an update, and then just in case, and then I can always roll back to that.
I don't know whether this will be covered in the next one about sharpening. Any initial guidance on sharpening and when you do it? Does the amount of sharpening vary according to the camera you use?
It does. Yeah, the more modern cameras tend to, and less the camera than the glass you're using. I mean, if you're using very sharp glass, you know, good lenses and stuff, then generally what comes in is clearer and sharper anyway. I tend to sharpen for output. So if most of the time, most of the stuff that we do is going to end up on Facebook, isn't it? In which case, forget about sharpening, because Facebook's going to massacre your image anyway, and it'll squeeze it down to whatever it is, 800 pixels and stuff like that. So you kind of, unless you've got something that you particularly need to sharpen, like the feathers on a wing or something like that, don't bother. Yeah. Now, if you go into print, then you do need to sharpen, and there's specific ways of sharpening to print, or if you know, and depending on whether you're going to print to A4 or you know A1 or whatever, more or less sharpening. I very rarely actually use sharpening anymore. Since the texture slider came in, I tend to find that the judicious use of the texture slider, along with the denoise, you know, if I'm shooting at reasonably high ISOs, some luminance noise creeps in or whatever, I generally use texture and denoise, and I'm not most of the time even going near the sharpening slider, unless I'm going to print, and then I will typically do 15%, 20% sharpening, because that just, you need that when you actually go to print. So I hope that gives an idea of what you're after.
Jackie Price asks, if you save as DNG and then stop subscribing to Adobe, Can the file be opened in the future?
Yes, it can. DNG is an open standard, so Adobe created it, but it's an open standard. So almost all file programs, GIMP and Photoshop and whatever, everything will read a DNG file, but it's Adobe who came up with the standard, if you like, but they made it an open one.
Edward says, could you mention again, oh goodness, the publisher of your book to gain a discount?
Well, there isn't a discount, but the publisher of my book, I've got a little book out on street photography, which is on Amazon actually. So if you just go to Amazon and look for Streets of Dublin by Joe Houghton, it's on Amazon and is available, and it's also available as a Kindle download as well. So yeah, hope you enjoy that if you do order it.
Benita says, I'm thinking of doing your day training course on Lightroom, but I'm still using standalone Lightroom version 5.7. Do I need the latest version of Lightroom Classic to be able to participate?
If you're using older versions of Lightroom, most of it is the same. Now, there will be a few things that have been included in the updates and the subscription versions that you might not have in 5.7, but most of it will be there. Texture slider isn't there. But most of the stuff is, so you'd get 85%, 85% of the stuff will be what you recognize. There'll always be a few bits and pieces that have been newly added that you won't be able to do, but it wouldn't slow you down significantly. No.
This is from Atul. I think it's a re-question. If I simply add the file to Lightroom, can I customize the metadata without being converted to do it to DNG?
Yeah, I think that's similar to the one that we did earlier on, isn't it?
Yeah.
So Atul, I think your question we probably added.
Yeah.
So come into an existing image, go to the preset under EXIF and IPTC, make the changes that you want and apply them using the preset. Yeah.
I think he's saying, is it okay with the DNG file? I think.
Oh, it is. Yeah, it doesn't matter whether it's a raw file or a DNG file. You can still add the metadata. Yeah.
Janice, I think we're going to say that's being answered in the next talk, which
the images using keywords. Yeah. Yeah.
Do you have any places? No, we do that. Can you move?
I think you're too late, Karen.
Pictures? Can you move pictures from Lightroom CC
to Classic? You certainly can. I'm going to cover collections next time round, and that helps. The collections is how you get pictures into the cloud, and that would get them into Lightroom CC for you as well.
Yeah, I think that's being questioned. Jenny Monk says, I like to keep all my images on external drives, so I copy my SD card to the external drive and then add to Lightroom. Is that okay? Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah, and because sometimes actually it's a faster way of doing it, to use the Windows copy or use the Mac copy to get the files from the SD card onto the hard drive, and then just tell Lightroom add it. If it already knows that a folder is there already, then you right-click on the folder and just say synchronize, and it rereads the folder and updates itself with any information about the photos in the folder. If it doesn't know that the folder exists yet, then you use add. Okay, so I hope that works for Melanie. For Jenny, sorry. Yeah, that's super.
Vivian says, I have my files on my hard drive, having always used Photoshop. Do I need to import them all again through Lightroom and back to the original file to be able to adjust them in Lightroom?
Yeah, if you've always edited using Photoshop, those edits are in Photoshop. Now, you can tell Lightroom to just add your files in situ where they are. So tell Lightroom about the folder and add the files, and it will read them into Lightroom so that it knows where the files are stored. And if they're regular Photoshop files, if they're PNG files or they're PSD files, Lightroom will read the data about the changes that you've made to the files in Photoshop and allow you to see those edits. Now, obviously, it can't decode layers and stuff like that. So, you've got limitations as to what you can do. But yeah, it will. You can certainly bring them in without having to duplicate them. You just add them in situ. Yeah.
Paul has been enjoying your talk, Joe.
Thank you.
And
Yes,
he wants
Paul.
us to know if there's a way
yeah.
to add keywords to a whole batch of files.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll show you that one, Paul. Let's go back into our folder, our Lightroom tips and tricks folder. Okay, so here was a set of images that I was just going to play with over the workshops. Okay, so let's say we want to add the same keyword to these 4 files. So click on the first one, shift and click on the last one. Okay, and then come over here to where it says keywording. Okay, and I'm going to add at the end of that list. Yeah, where are we? Why did I right click? Okay, so in that list there, just there, I'm going to add in Grimwood, which is Paul's last name. Okay, so if I click on OK now, yeah, there it is. We've got Grimwood in those folders. So if I click on this one, yeah, no Grimwood. If I go back to one of those 4 and click on it, yeah, Grimwood. So you click on the 4 or select the whole set, put in your new keyword, hit enter, and it's applied. Yep.
Excellent.
Okay.
Richard Bircham, how are crop overlay templates changed from landscape format to portrait format?
Okay.
Can this
So
overlay
I've
be
just
done regardless of imported image file format?
It can. So there we are. I'm in a crop overlay with this shot of Blender lock. If I want to switch that into portrait format, I press the X key, and that gives me the same overlay in portrait mode. So X switches between portrait and horizontal, and then you can make whatever changes you like. Now I still want it portrait. Yeah, there we go. So the X key in the crop tool allows you to switch those. I think that's what you're asking. So I hope that answers the question.
Here's a very quick one. Sarah Bevan asked, can you change the background color when previewing pictures from black to white?
Let me come out of the crop tool. Do you mean these backgrounds? So if I right click on the background there, I can go to dark gray, or I can go to white. Or I presume that, I think that's what you mean.
Yes, I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. So yes, you can. Yeah.
Thank you. We're coming up to the 4 o'clock, so shall we just take a few more? Are you happy to do just
I'm good.
more?
I'm good. Yeah.
Okay. Steve Gaskin asks, I tried using iCloud for my pictures folder so I could access from both iMac and MacBook, but it took a long time to load images. Do you have the same issue with Dropbox? Can you use the same Lightroom library to link to 2 computers?
Right. I'm using Dropbox, but the folders under Dropbox are on my local hard drive. Okay. So as far as I know, Lightroom does not play well with images stored in the cloud, but not stored locally. Okay. So you can't, for instance, link Lightroom to a folder that only exists in the cloud and expect it to work. It can't pull stuff down and send stuff up fast enough. It needs to work on a local drive. Whether that drive is the C drive, or whether that drive is a drive connected via either Ethernet or via USB or Lightning or whatever. So I think that answers that one. And if you did make it work, it would be horrendously slow because it's squirting the data up and down from the cloud, whether that's iCloud or whether that's any other cloud storage. So it's not designed to work with cloud storage directly. You can store backups in cloud storage, but you can't use it to access things normally. What time was that question at, Melanie? Just so that I can see the rest of it.
Just before 3:14.
3:14. Okay, there we are. Let's just go down to 3:14. I can see the question then. Who was it? It was
Steve.
Oh, there we are. Steve Gaskin. Yeah. Okay, can you use the same Lightroom library to link to two computers? No, the Lightroom catalog, I presume that's what you mean by library. The Lightroom catalog sits on one computer. Now, you can look at multiple drives, but one computer needs to be your master catalog. You can have other catalogs on another computer. Say your main machine is at home, you have a laptop that you take with you when you go out. You can create a catalog on the Lightroom on the laptop, and then import that catalog into your main catalog. But there has to be one main catalog. You can't have kind of two catalogs on two machines, or one machine, two machines looking at the same catalog. No, that is a recipe for a total disaster with Lightroom. So.
Okay. Rose Atkinson asks, if I want to reorganize my image folders to free up space and move some off my hard drive onto an external drive, what's the best way to do this and make sure Lightroom knows where the files are? Right.
This is the best way, but it's also a painfully slow way, Rose. Okay, so set aside a Sunday where you're not doing much else, or you're going out for a nice walk or something. Okay, so let's just say that I've shot my month, and I'm ready to put the month's photos onto my NAS drive. Well, what I do is I click on my my folder for January or whatever, or this talk for the Photoshop 2020 talk. Okay, and what I do is now I drag that down within the Lightroom windows. Okay, so I drag that folder down to, here's my NAS drive, and I would drag it into a 2021 folder on the NAS drive. And by doing that drag within Lightroom, it will copy the images and move them down onto the NAS drive, and Lightroom knows where everything is now. Yeah. If you do it external to Lightroom, you then have to kind of tell Lightroom you've done it by resynchronizing the folders and stuff. And it's a bit messy. You can do it, but it's a bit messy. So basically, if you're going to move files around in Lightroom, do the drag and drop in Lightroom with the relevant external drives connected. It'll take a while. Just leave it running, and it'll do it. You'll see the counts change in the two folders as the files are being moved. Okay, Melanie?
Excellent. There's another one about storage. So Janet Gibson asks, could you please advise how I can set up either Dropbox or Google Drive? My photos are stored on external drives.
Okay, I think that's outside the bounds of the Lightroom kind of workshop, setting up Dropbox or Google Drive. But if you drop me an email, Janet, we can have a chat and maybe do a one-to-one session or something, and I can help you with that. Yeah.
Excellent, thank you. John Francis, how many graduated filters can you apply?
As many as you like.
Can you use another one on a different area to the sky in your picture?
Right.
How do you invert the filter to affect the foreground?
Right. So let's drag down from the top rather. Okay. So there's my graduated filter from the top, darkening the sky. Yeah, and we'll show it with the H key. Then I'll drag another one up from the bottom, and I'll drag another one in from the side. Yeah, so as many as you like, and then another one in from this side. Yeah, so there's 4 graduated filters affecting the image. And what was the second half of that question was, how do you invert the filter? Yeah, so let's say that I want to invert this filter, which is the current one highlighted, the apostrophe key, turns it the other way around. So it's just the same as that radial filter shortcut that I showed you, the invert on the radial filter, outside and in. With the graduated filter, the invert is the apostrophe key for one way or another. And if you want to delete those filters, then just click on each of the dots and hit delete, and they go away. So that one you see, invert, yeah, switch it from the top to the bottom. Very easy.
Okay, we'll just do a few more, just one or two more. Can you sync keywords as you did metadata?
Yes, you can sync any changes that you make to the image, whether it's keywords, whether it's exposure adjustments, whether it's whatever, make the changes, hit the sync button, choose which changes you want applied, off it goes. Yeah.
I think Mick Warmington is sort of telling us that we all have our own way of doing things. He finds your method.
He's
sorry.
Yeah, because the metadata, Mick said my method of labeling folders by date is completely redundant. He uses folders by place. Yeah, absolutely, and we all have different ways of doing that. I just think I can remember stuff that I took, you know, and I know that it was something like August last year. Now that's in the metadata, and next time we come together, I'll show you actually how I don't need to create year and month and day folders, because Lightroom knows all that stuff. But the reason I create my folders in the year and the month and the, you know, that kind of stuff is that also reflects through into Finder and into Windows Explorer. Okay, so, you know, if I lost Lightroom, I could still go to all my folders and they'd be in date order in the folders. So it's not redundant. There is method in my madness. Okay, that was that one then. Yeah.
I'm just trying to find some different ones. Nicola Robley. I import into Mac Photo and then import selected photos for processing into Lightroom. Should I be importing directly into Lightroom instead and not use Photo?
Well, if you're not using Photo for your editing, but you're using Lightroom, then it's just a redundant step. Yeah, you don't need to. So you can turn off I think there's an option for Mac Photo, you know, that it becomes the default import. And if you turn that off, just make Lightroom your default import, and then import it and develop into that. Mac Photo is all right, but Lightroom is more powerful. So, you know, yeah, I think you're probably going through an extra step that you don't need to, Nicola, on that.
Kevin's in a mess. Kevin Murray.
Many duplicates, I see. Yes, I think we need a one-to-one session, Kevin.
You can sort out methods, can you?
Oh, definitely. Oh, yeah, I do it all the time. Yeah. And we can do it over Zoom as well, you know, because I can show you on your drives and talk you through it and all the rest of it. So yeah, that's a service I offer.
Right, I think what we've said is we're going to take a shot of these questions, and Joe
and we'll
will have a look at them
and fold as many as we can. Yeah,
things that could be covered in the next session. I hope you've all signed up for that. So I think we will. Believe it or not, you've got through about 60 questions there, but there's another 30 in the pipeline. So
wow, oh, we're not doing too badly then.
They're very interested and very good at asking the questions. So thank you so much, Joe. We've learnt some nuances and some magic tricks, and we've even learnt how to cook ham and eggs. So thank you so much for all that you've imparted this afternoon and that you're going to impart in 2 weeks' time.
Well, thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, Joe. The Digital Imaging Southeast Centre are very glad that you've all joined us this afternoon. Thank you for coming along. But also a huge thank you to the team behind the scenes who do a sterling job in bringing these webinars to you. RPS Digital Imaging has many more online events in the pipeline, and if you're not already a member, you will find that even though the fee for non-members is low, if you're an RPS member, you will probably save money by joining Digital Imaging as a digital member only. So Joe will be continuing his journey around Lightroom when he steps up a gear and shows its more advanced capabilities on Friday the 26th of February, same time, same place. Some of you are already signed up, but there's still time to register. So in the meantime, stay safe, everybody, and thank you and goodbye, and thank you, Joe. We'll see you again.